At this point, no matter what people say, it's like, I'm sorry guys, I will never be able to work up enough energy to ever legitimately read A Tale of Two Cities. Uh, it could have Michael Bay level explosions at some point, and I still really would not give it the time of day. But I do, in fact, like A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Maybe because it's a little bit more concise and to the point. That, and I didn't have to actually read Cliff Notes to understand where the story was going. Because legitimately, the version of Tale of Two Cities they tried to force us to read, the English was archaic enough to where it's like I was constantly stopping to look up, like, what the heck does this mean? What does that mean? I'm not one that's naturally inclined to look at historical stuff much, whether it's historical battles, various movements in history, unless I'm galvanized by trying to seek out something specific. Like, say, to understand where some of the pulps came from, or even, in some cases, to understand some sort of thing that was put in a particular series I like. Say, Harrington and the whole setup with Robespierre and everything. And even certain things with Three Musketeers and a handful of things I legitimately did enjoy through school. They set it up in such a way that it didn't really engage people. It's like you're giving us all these different things where it's very cut and dry. And heck, even when I try to look back at some of this stuff later, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to still go back to the Cliff Notes because it's just, again, a wheelhouse that doesn't engage me as much. But the same goes for a lot of people that are more like historical buffs, and they get energized from reading about all these things. Well, same goes for me. I get energized reading the pulps, the simple adventures. Yes, it's entertainment. No, it's not very, I guess you could say, intellectually stimulating in terms of like maybe teaching some sort of higher minded idea. But if I really want to look for something like that, then I'll look at like a case study. Say, like, if somebody does a case study on Narnia, and like, okay, hey, what's the symbolism in here? And I'll have to be galvanized on my own to look into it. A lot of schooling forces you to not consume, but like try to study certain things, and it's just like nope, my brain's just not engaging. Even some Jane Austen stuff, I'm just like, this is really cut and dry. I'd rather, say, be reading Lord of the Rings, I guess in a way it depends on the delivery of the writer. Because I checked out by like chapter 2 of Tale of Two Cities. And yeah, I used the Cliff Notes to read and understand, like, oh hey, the one guy had a twin or something, and something about guillotines and uprisings and everything else. But yeah, I was not engaging with it. The version I had to read, like I said before, the English was a little bit more archaic, and you had to constantly keep looking up, like, okay, if this was a common phrase back then when he was first writing this thing, now some other stuff has kind of updated the vernacular, so that way it's a little bit easier to like roll off the tongue and kind of understand what's being said. Like some of the facelift updates for it have done this based on what I can see of the sample that I looked at, which again, my eyes were already starting to glaze over with remembered pain. And yeah, like, I guess the TLDR of all this is schools do not really engage students. They just have them, monkey out things and like learn by rote. And it, even in my time, that's kind of how it was. It's like all these things are are lined up in front of your face and said, like, oh, these are classics for X, Y, and Z reason. Honestly, most teenagers, or even now, like, aren't really going to care about that. They'll have to be galvanized on their own to take a look at stuff if they want to. So I think schools should offer more than just what's on the drawing board, which is why I can see why more people are turning towards homeschooling. But just the biggest thing, it's like, yeah, sometimes you can't force feed people these classics. They're gonna go the Cliff Notes version, like, cause that's what I did mostly, because back when I was in middle and high school. Like near the end of high school, you know, the internet was really ramping up, and you could look up different essays and things. That's the reason why the MLA format and all that stuff had to, you know, properly quote people, because, you know, plagiarism and all that stuff. You could lift things wholesale. But yeah, I would basically read other people's essays about all these books so I could see what some of the general themes are, and I could parrot it back at the teacher and be like, okay, yeah, I air quote read it. Yeah. Sometimes when you're trying to get bigger ideas across, yeah, you'll get some people that will instantly click with it. But sometimes with some things, you really will have to dumb it down and make it more digestible, especially if you're trying to talk to somebody who's a complete and utter novice into whatever theology or master studies course you're going through. Most of these books, even in college, the big college book I can remember that I really enjoyed reading was Dashiell Hammett. You know, with like the PI work and the general mystery, and kind of like but it wasn't completely hopeless from what I remember. I did do a little bit more Shakespeare while I was in college. One guy had a really big thing for the Golden Compass series, and you know what? I cliff note basically that whole series because he wanted all of us to read it, and it's like I checked out once they made like religion the big bad guy again. I'm just like, to me it was like really ham-fisted. So again, I read a bunch of essays about it and any kind of cliff notes I could get my hands on to really like read but not read the series. Yeah, there's, like I've always said, there's stuff that'll click with people and stuff that just won't, and I'm in the category of most literary classics I did not click with. You know, the Slaughterhouse 5 thing, nope, cliff notes. It's like To Kill a Mockingbird, cliff notes. Yeah, it's like I didn't really want to read about depressing things in the present, past, or even possible future, even while I was in high school or middle school. Oh boy. I mean, it seems to me like after a certain point, a certain kind of delineation point, a lot of these classics just turned into overall misery fests. And it doesn't help that some of them aren't kind of a little bit more updated. Like, I remember in college, I had to try to read part of the Canterbury Tales in Middle English, and I'm just like, okay, it's like, I'm sorry, teacher, I'm going to need a translation. And I picked up the translated, modernized versions where it used everyday language to convey the story. Now, I get it. There's some linguists out there that absolutely love the Canterbury Tales in their original format. But for me to understand the context or even remotely connect it to anything, I had to have the modern layman caveman translation. Woo boy. The classics. But even with Don Quixote and stuff, yeah, I had to look up the version the teacher gave us was a little bit long in the tooth, so I went around and found one that had more updated, you know, English, like a format of English that I could understand a little bit more readily. Now, granted, yes, in case of like localization and everything else, there's a whole big fight about that, but sometimes it helps to put it in, at least, you know, see red spot run, you know, and change it into the red dog ran. You know, you basically kind of just have to reword things to where a majority of people can at least understand the basics. Woo boy. But to get to the other part of the vid, because Mr. Declan linked me into this lovely gem, and by Helix, me with the evil superheroes have redeemed good villains at this point. And as you can see on the screen, yes, in my setting the angels are evil, and God is evil too. That's honestly one big thing that I'm really heavily veering away from, especially with Uplift Protocol. So, Yeah. What a day for books, huh? Being reminded of all the books of ghost books of high school haunting past, and even some within college. Have a good day, everybody. Conversations, because you never can tell. One person's treasure is another person's like, well, I ain't touching that with a 10-foot pole. You just never can tell.